Okay, so I started out with a few options. That is a sheet of plexiglass. I then have another sheet of polycarbonate, which is a scrap piece. You can see the protective coating is already coming off on the edges, and it already looks slightly scuffed up here and there. I also have a tiny piece of acrylic, which I did start out with, but halfway through I decided to change and go with a larger one, so I then switched over to the polycarbonate. You can choose whichever you want. They all come with a different price point, and you should also go with something that's a lot more convenient. These are just a few pieces of balsa wood that I had. Now, I didn't use all of them. I pretty much just rummaged around to see what I had left over in the storeroom, and this was more of a build as you go kind of project for me. So yeah, these are the ones that I use. It's a fairly simple, quick, really cost-effective project if you want to go about it. Now, for my design, I needed to have an exact square. Now, I marked out a square on my sheet. I made the silly mistake of trying to mark it with a small pencil on a piece of plastic, which didn't really work out as such. So just make sure you kind of use, either a wax pencil or just use a marker. So once I had my square, I added on a little more at the end. This was just because I was gonna have the base sandwiched between two pieces of wood to keep the sign upright. Now I only needed an extra 1/2 inch, but I wasn't sure if the sign would be able to stay upright with only 1/2 inch supporting it on either side. So again, it's better just to measure twice or thrice than to cut and run short. I really should have remembered this when I was cutting and checking the length of my LEDs. Now this is just a regular LED strip. It's the non-waterproof type. You can see I've pretty much used quite a bit. It's like about half roll now. I already primed the end. You do not need to have, the specific ends. You can just solder it straight, but I use some shrink tubing also. Now, when you want to cut and score your sheet of plastic, you can use a utility knife, an X-Acto knife, or if you're like me and have a hot knife handy, it makes your life a million times easier in doing this. So now that I decided to switch over and change my sheet, I simply started scoring it with a utility knife, but I kind of ran out of patience and I decided to plug in the hot knife. Now, even with my hot knife, I did not set it at the highest setting. I went slightly above the medium setting, and I also scored my sheet of polycarbonate to about 3/4 the thickness. Once I had it at 3/4 the thickness, I simply decided to place it along the piece of scrap wood that I have below it and apply some quick pressure, and it snaps right off. Now, if you're doing this on the edge of a table and such, please make sure to wear some protective gear and look away from it, as there is a tendency for it to snap off unevenly and even at times have pieces or shards fly at you or in other areas, so just be safe. Now, I'm simply just separating the protective plastic that's on both sides of it so I can separate it from the excess piece that I will most probably use for another project. Now, based on the design that you have and you want to etch or Dremel in, my one needed to be exactly centralized. So I printed out 2 of my signs and I mirrored them so that way the script would be right side up once I was finished. But if you're doing a particular design or a scene or something, you don't really need to worry about mirroring or flipping your image. Now you can centralize your image in a variety of ways by just measuring equidistances on the edges, or just take the quicker shortcut version that I did, which was simply find the center and the middle of the sides on my piece of square and just draw like your X and Y axis like we would when we were doing graphs in school. I'm using the Sharpie Fine Point, which is also what I use for most of my doodles and sketches and stuff. But use whatever you have on hand. Don't go out specifically to buy something. This was a project which I found to be really cost effective and time effective. And I generally like to find stuff that I can do fairly quickly and not have to like lose an arm and a leg in trying to buy supplies. If you do have a drawing or a pattern which needs to be centralized like mine, please do remember that you have an additional bit of plastic on one of the sides, so don't include that when you're measuring it for your scoring. Now, if you have a design like mine again, or similar that needs to be in the center, simply fold it in half and again into a quarter, so you have again a X and Y axis kind of centralized cross grid. Simply align both of them, and when you are, make sure you look at it exactly straight on overhead, not forwards, not backwards, because it will shift a bit depending on the angle you look at it. Now I'm just going to take some regular tape and just secure it in place so that it doesn't shift or move. Now that's done, I have my Dremel tool attached and set up, and I am using the extension arm. I'm starting out with the fine cone shape drill head. I do have two other options and I switch them out now and then depending on whether I need to fill in a larger space or the script. I started out by doing the outline so that I could peel it out and then just fill it in like block work. I did all the scripting in one go, as well as the outer circle, which is just a lot of dots. Once you're done, I simply used a sharp tool. I had a stitch opener handy, or also known as a seam ripper in some parts of the world. So I used that to just take it out, and then I simply filled out all the block empty spaces. Now, after you're done, just peel off the rest of the protective plastic. You will see that it is not the sharpest or with the most even and straight of lines. This is when you go in and smooth it out and fill it out as much as you want. You can keep fiddling with it as much as you want until you're satisfied. Now I take my LEDs and measure it out. Also remember, you need to cut it between the copper points. There's usually a small little scissor mark. If you don't cut it here, the strip will just not work. I was silly and did not take into account the little extra bit that's on the end of the LED. I should have cut my piece of wood at least 1/2 centimeter larger. I didn't. So you have the piece of LED on my sign kind of taped, glued down to the side. Now I marked out the exact size of my acrylic on the pieces of wood, and I'm just going to use a small hand saw to cut out 3 pieces. So I'm just trying out to see if what I had planned is actually possible. And you want to try and get it equidistant and exactly in the center, because you're going to run the LED strip along there. And it's not just about the LED strip. You're going to try and centralize it as much as you can so that your sign doesn't topple over. After marking it down, I then took my Dremel and I had added on the rotary sanding bit, and I simply kind of sanded out like a little turret, something of the sort. You pretty much get what I mean. I'm lost for the exact word, but yeah, it doesn't need to be the most perfect thing, and you're pretty much just gonna fit the LED in it. I opted for hot glue straight from the glue gun. It was quicker, it's faster, and yeah, now I just decided to double check that I didn't actually manage to damage it while I was doing it. I plugged it in and praise to the heavens, it works. Now I'm going to take my piece of polycarbonate and just place it on top to see how it goes. And yeah, then begins the slightly painstaking part, because you're going to have to hold it at least until it sticks and adheres to the other piece of wood. I kind of started out with super glue because I like doing things and getting them over quickly when I'm doing DIYs, but I later ended up opting for epoxy rather than using hot glue. So don't worry about having fingerprints and grubby marks on your sign at the moment. What I did was I laid it down and I adhered one part of it onto the base. Now I put down a piece of soft fabric that I just had, like an old pillowcase or something, just so you don't accidentally scuff up your sheet, because you have taken off the protective coating on both sides. Once one piece of wood is stuck, just make sure you stick the other piece on over there as well and keep it as level as possible. You can use, if you have a balance beam, or just use one of your triangles from your geometry kit, or just steal your little niece and nephew's one for a few minutes and then put it back. Now I did not want to use epoxy for this, so I just plugged in my little hot glue gun and I ran hot glue exactly straight onto the LEDs. And then I simply aligned it. Now, while the edge is still a bit jagged, quite jagged actually, I decided to just polish and torch the ends of my polycarbonate. If you have a small jeweler's blowtorch, you can use that, but I, at the moment, currently had this small like cigarette lighter, but the flame on this is similar to a blowtorch. Now remember not to hold it in one place too long, because it will warp your plastic otherwise. But just run it back and forth a few times on different edges, alternate between them, and you will have a nice curved, smooth, polished edge. I'm just going to simply smooth out and fill in everything once again. This part is completely optional. I did not want just the plain raw finish for wood, so I just took out a little bit of gold paint that I have and thinned it out, so it pretty much gives me just like a gold wash or a gold tint. You can also see I've been snacking on hazelnuts. Thankfully the packet of chips is not in the frame, but yeah, I pretty much eat all day. And that's it. You can just polish it up, take the finger marks off and everything, and you're good to go. Plug it in and you're all set. Oh, I'm also running it off a 12-volt adapter. If you don't want to buy a separate adapter or anything, you can even just use an old phone adapter as long as it's about 12 volts, or depending on the voltage your LED strip requires. You can even hook it up to a separate battery pack if needed, and I'll most probably do that in another video. So that's it. I hope you guys liked it. Hi everyone, it's Tanya here, and I hope you all liked the video I made as to how I went about to make my sign with my logo and stuff. I just wanted to apologize that I know the audio sounds really echoey right now. It's just that I did not want to have to set up my mic and stuff, so I'm recording straight from my phone. Yeah, also this doesn't look the brightest right now. It's just because I have a bazillion lights on. Ceiling lights, 2 here, 1 straight ahead. You get the idea. But down in the description bar you will also find everything that I actually used to make it. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find the links in the description bar as well. And I'm looking forward to any suggestions, comments as to what I should make next, what else I should DIY, so on and so forth. I'm looking to upload at least once a week, if not more. But yeah, and I hope all of you have a lovely week ahead. Stay safe, stay happy, keep smiling. Bye!